They once helped a human. It was a quiet moment in an old war, somewhere in the edges of known space, where the grand empires didn't care to look. The planet had no real value, no rare minerals, no strategic position, just barren plains and a dying sun. But it was here, on a forgotten mining colony called Drell 9, that a single Terran was saved by a species no one remembers anymore, the Veari. Small, bird-like, too soft for war, too gentle for diplomacy, but kind. Deeply, foolishly kind. The human was Captain Eli Mercer, a young Terran scout whose ship had been shredded by pirates. He'd crawled out of the wreckage half dead, lungs torn by vacuum exposure, and skin burned from coolant spray. The Veari found him unconscious near their irrigation channels. They could have left him. Should have. Helping a human back then meant painting a target on your back. The Terran Republic wasn't loved in the galaxy. It was feared, misunderstood, misjudged. But the Veari nursed Eli back. Not just his body, but his spirit, too. They fed him strange fruits that made his tongue go numb, taught him songs instead of speeches, let him sit by their flame crystals at night, and listened to the silence without filling it with questions. For 6 months, they kept him safe. Then one day, without asking for anything in return, they gave him a working shuttle they'd rebuilt from scavenged wrecks. He promised he'd repay them, swore it under the cracked sky of Drell 9. Years passed. The galaxy forgot the Veari existed. Even Eli thought maybe they'd moved on or been wiped out. After all, their planet never showed up on any of the main trade routes. And the Terran military had enough conflicts to drown a dozen lifetimes. But Eli never truly forgot. Not when he rose through the Republic ranks, not when he retired from duty, not even when war nearly broke Earth itself. So when the signal came, no one believed it at first. A frequency unused in decades. An ancient Terran distress code, modified slightly, with a Veari inflection. A plea, not a command. One phrase only. The ones who helped are now in need. No coordinates, no threat, just a call. It spread like wildfire through the Terran fleets. Some thought it was a prank, others a trap. But when Eli Mercer, now Admiral Mercer of the old reserve fleet, stood in the Warnet hollow chambers and played the call again, there was a silence no one dared to interrupt. He didn't give a speech, didn't ask for volunteers. He just looked at the screen and said, "I know where they are, I remember." That night, across 3 sectors, dormant Terran ships blinked back to life. From captains on leave to smugglers with old Navy blood in their veins, the message reached them. They didn't answer with words. They answered by undocking. They came. Not because of politics, not because of glory, but because years ago, on a dusty planet that didn't matter, kindness was given without price, and now the debt was being called in, not by the Veari themselves, but by fate or honor, or something deeper no alien species could ever quite understand. Within 36 hours, the Republic's lost children, the wandering captains, rogue units, retired warhawks, had all set course for a star system nobody had spoken of in over 20 years. And every Terran captain who had ever heard the name Drell 9 answered. It started as a hum, a low, quiet vibration beneath the decks of every Terran ship headed to Drell 9. Not mechanical, not from the engines or reactors. It was something else, something deeper, a kind of shared pulse, the kind of thing soldiers feel before a battle, the quiet before the storm when the air tastes metallic and your instincts whisper that something old is about to be written in blood. But this wasn't just another call to war. It was personal. For Admiral Eli Mercer, the hum began in his bones. He sat in the command chair of Resolute, the last working dreadnought from the siege of Vortha Prime, now stripped of her paint and flying under no official Republic banner. Around him were people who didn't ask questions, veterans, ghosts. People who'd served with him before, who didn't need orders, they just needed a direction. ETA to Drell 9? Eli asked without looking up. His XO, a half-cybernetic woman named Juno Coyle, replied, 16 hours. We're running silent. No pings, no active scans, but we're not alone. Eli nodded slowly. He already knew. More ships had joined the route, from mercenaries to forgotten planetary militias. Even a few pirate cruisers, painted black with no visible IDs, were tagging along. Not for loot. Not even for reputation. They were here for the same reason he was. The Ve'ari had saved one of theirs once, and humans, for all their violence and chaos, had long memories when it came to debts, and even longer tempers when someone dared harm the ones who offered them kindness. Back on Drell 9, the sky was burning. The Ve'ari had never understood war. Their ships were ceremonial, shaped like petals and colored like sunsets. Their weapons were defensive tools, stunners, disruptors, nothing fatal. They believed in redirection, not destruction. But now, against the merciless assault of the core Dominion, their philosophies had become tombstones. The core were nothing like humans. Reptilian, hive-minded, obsessed with obedience and submission. Their empire had already swallowed 17 systems in the last 6 months. No one knew why they were on Drell 9. There was no tactical value, no resources. It made no sense. Until they found the vault. Buried beneath the old plains where Eli Mercer had once lain dying, the vault was something the Ve'ari had protected for centuries. Not because it was powerful, but because they didn't fully understand it. Ancient tech, maybe, or a remnant from one of the vanished first civilizations. Whatever it was, it lit up when the core got close, and that was enough to doom the planet. The Ve'ari had sent out the call just before their comms were jammed. Only one message, one hope. And in that dying light, Elder Rishon, last speaker of the Ve'ari Council, stood in the ruins of the Harmony Hall, watching the sky fracture with fire. He whispered, "Please, let them remember." They remembered. Ship after ship dropped out of slipspace in high orbit, silent and black. No formation, no banner, just presence. The Resolute arrived first, its aging hull humming with shield capacitors and twin coil guns warming up for the first time in years. Behind her came the Grey Widow, an ex-smuggler ship captained by a woman who'd once been rescued by Mercer during the Syndicate uprising. Then came the Thirsty Dog, Nemesis Fire, Winds of Terra, old names, new teeth. In the void above Drell 9, the ragtag fleet assembled. And every captain, every crew, every last human aboard knew they weren't there for negotiation. They were there to answer a kindness. Juno Kyle looked over the tactical board. Counting 32 ships, all Terran, not a single Republic Navy signature, no official support. Eli smirked. Would have ruined the poetry. Juno didn't laugh. The Corps have taken ground positions all across the northern hemisphere. There are civilian shelters still holding out in the south. Most of the orbital defenses are already wiped. We've got minutes, maybe less, before the Corps notice we're here. Eli stood up. His voice was calm, almost soft. Then we hit first. They didn't bother with comms. No ultimatums, no diplomacy. Terrans had learned long ago that some enemies don't respect words. The Corps only understood submission and pain. And humanity wasn't built to submit. Resolute fired the first shot. A tungsten slug, 2 meters wide, traveling at a fraction of light speed, tore through the Corps command frigate in orbit like it was paper. No explosion. Just a silence followed by a ripple of light as atmosphere and flesh became mist. That was the signal. The Terran fleet roared to life like an old beast remembering how to kill. Flak cannons lit up the sky. Coil guns fired in rhythm. boarding pods launched like missiles into enemy hulls. Ships with patched hulls and homemade tech danced between plasma bolts like they were born for it. No perfect formation, no elegant tactics, just brutal, ugly war. Exactly the way humans liked it. On the ground, the Veari shelters shook. Children screamed, elders huddled, and through the chaos, one young Veari named Lynch pressed her ear to the shelter wall. She heard something. Not the high-pitched whine of core drones, but something different. Low, powerful, rhythmic. Then it came. The sky opened in thunder as drop pods slammed into the crust. The Terrans had landed. In the southern valley, squads of armored soldiers emerged from their burning pods, rifles glowing, visors down. They moved like ghosts, tight formations, no wasted movement, no mercy. Eli Mercer was among them, boots hitting the dirt for the first time in decades. His pulse pounded, his vision blurred slightly with age and adrenaline. But when he saw the old Veari irrigation tower in the distance, still standing through the war, something clenched in his chest. Memories, faces, laughter by firelight. He didn't speak, just signaled forward. The human advance began. Juno Kyle was in the second wave, coordinating strikes from orbit. "Core forces attempting to fall back toward the vault," she reported. "They know we're here for it." Eli's voice came through the comms. "Then we stop them." He paused, then added something only she would understand. "No mercy." That wasn't a strategic order. It was personal. They weren't here for medals. They weren't here to claim the vault, or study it, or even protect it. They were here because a long time ago, people with wings and songs had saved a human when no one else would. And now those same people were being exterminated. Humanity didn't forget that kind of debt, not when blood was on the line. The battle lasted 8 hours. 8 hours of brutality, chaos, and fire. Core dropships fell from the sky like burning insects. Terran ground squads pushed through ridgelines, bunkers, and tunnels. Drones clashed in the air. The land itself cracked from the heat. And when it was over, the Veari stepped out of their shelters and saw something they didn't understand at first. Silence. The core were gone. Smoke drifted from the ruins. Bodies littered the earth, and standing amid the wreckage were the humans, bloodied, battered, but standing, not with banners or victory cheers, just silence. Lynch walked up to one of them, Eli Mercer himself. She didn't recognize him, not at first. He looked older, harder. But then he removed his helmet, and his eyes softened when he saw her wings. "You're safe," he whispered. Lynch didn't know what to say. Her voice trembled. "You came back." Eli nodded. "Of course I did." Behind them, the sun finally rose again over Drell 9. The fires had dimmed. The vault was safe. The Veari lived. And the Terrans? They didn't wait for thanks, didn't build statues, didn't ask for stories to be written. They simply boarded their ships and left. One by one, fading into the void, leaving behind only whispers and one message that echoed through Veari songs for centuries to come. They remembered. The journey back to space felt heavier than the descent. The battle was won, yes. The core had been pushed off-world. The vault was safe. The Veari still lived. But none of the Terrans smiled. There were no cheers, no celebration in their ranks. Because humans didn't come for glory. They came for a debt. And now that the debt was paid in blood, silence sat where joy should have been. Admiral Eli Mercer sat in the field med bay of the Resolute, staring at a long tear in his armor plating. It traced from his ribs down to the thigh, a plasma graze. Not deep, not deadly, but enough to remind him he wasn't as fast as he used to be. Across from him, Juno Kyle leaned against the bulkhead, helmet off, face streaked with soot and blood. "Reports say 207 confirmed dead," she muttered, scanning her datapad. "Mostly from the Grey Widow and Nemesis fire. Ground losses, 23, all volunteers, all old school." Eli didn't speak at first. He just looked at his own hands, shaking slightly, blood under the nails. Finally, he said, "It should have been more." Juno frowned. "You're blaming yourself again." "No, I'm saying we got lucky." She sighed, slid down beside him. The medbay was quiet, aside from the distant hum of cooling systems. Outside, they could see the curve of Drell 9 against the stars, still scarred but breathing. "You realize what we just did?" she asked. Eli looked over. "We saved a people," she nodded. "And now?" He hesitated. "Now we disappear again, just like always." But not everyone was ready to disappear. Back on Drell 9, the Veari were gathering. Not in fear, but in awe. Their elders whispered that this moment would pass into legend, that songs would be written of the burning sky day, that children born under this very sun would carry names like Mercer, Kyle, and Terra. But among the younger Veari, those who had huddled in the shelters, listening to the sounds of humanity roaring down from the heavens, something new was stirring. Curiosity. Awe. Even longing. Lynch, still wrapped in smoke-stained bandages, stood with Elder Reshen near the ruins of Harmony Hall. "Are they gone?" she asked quietly. Reshen nodded. "Most of them. Like wind passing through trees. Loud, wild, but never staying." She swallowed hard. "Why?" He gave a sad little smile. "Because they are not like us. Their kindness burns hot, but short. They come when called, but never linger." Lynch stared at the stars. They should have stayed. Above, in orbit, not all ships were leaving just yet. A few lingered, not by order, not because of duty, because something didn't feel finished. One of those ships was the Thirsty Dog, captained by Mace Drake, an ex-Republic pilot turned rogue smuggler, well, something in between. He'd fought in the war zones no one recorded, served under no flag for 20 years, and carried enough guilt on his back to crush a moon. But this mission, it had changed something. He sat alone in his cockpit, a bottle of something strong in one hand, his eyes locked on the blue curve of Drell 9. "I'm not done," he muttered to himself. From behind, his gunner, a wiry teenager named Rel, asked, "With what?" Mace didn't answer at first, just took a swig, then said, "With running." Rel blinked. "That's new." Mace stood, dropped the bottle, and moved toward the comms console. He opened a secure channel, one that didn't bounce through the usual Terran networks. "Put me through to Mercer." On the Resolute, the bridge was winding down. Systems cooling, crew rotating out. The main view screen showed the Terran fleet slowly warping away, back to their lives, or what was left of them. Eli Mercer was in his quarters when the call came. The voice was unmistakable. Rough, gravel-tongued. Someone who'd spent more time in engine rooms and gunfights than anything close to politics. "Mace," Eli said with a dry chuckle. "Didn't expect to hear from you." "Didn't expect to call," Mace replied. "But I've been thinking, maybe this ain't over." Eli frowned. "What do you mean?" "You think the Corps are gonna let this go?" Mace asked. "You think they'll just write it off and move on?" Eli sighed, already knowing the answer. "No." "Then maybe we do something we haven't done before." "What's that?" Mace's voice hardened. "Stay." The idea spread fast. One ship decided to linger, then 2, then 4. Within a day, 12 Terran vessels had returned to orbit over Drell 9, sending encrypted comms back through the unofficial networks. They weren't under Republic command. No official sanction. But they weren't leaving either. And the reason was simple. Humanity didn't abandon its friends. Not again. Eli stood before his bridge crew the next morning, armor cleaned, but eyes heavy. "We're not pulling out," he said simply. The crew didn't react with cheers. They just nodded, because every one of them had been thinking the same thing. Eli continued, "This is no longer a hit and run. This is a stand. Drell 9 doesn't just need rescuing, it needs defending, rebuilding, guarding." "From the core?" Juno asked. Eli met her eyes. "From everything." Down on the surface, the Vayari didn't know how to process it. For centuries, they'd been taught that humans were dangerous, unpredictable, that their fire, while warm in moments, always burned too hot. And yet here they were, staying. They set up communication beacons, began coordinating medical supply drops, sent engineers down to help restore power grids. One Terran ship even deployed water purifiers. The Vayari watched all this with cautious wonder. And Lynch? She didn't just watch. She acted. The first time she stepped aboard a Terran ship, the Nemesis Fire Tweed-2, she was shaking. The human who met her was tall, tattooed, with arms like steel cables and eyes like ice. "You here to tour the war machine?" he asked with a smirk. Lynch shook her head. "No, I want to learn." He raised a brow. "Learn what?" She stepped forward, wings flaring slightly. "Everything." And so the next chapter began. Not of war. Not of revenge, but of alliance. Slow, awkward, fragile, but real. The Republic would later hear of the incident, of course. There would be investigations, hearings, political fallout. But none of that mattered on Drell 9. Because the people who mattered, the ones who had bled and fought and remembered, had already made their choice. This world wasn't just a footnote anymore. It was a symbol, a place where an old debt was paid, and where a new future, quiet and trembling, was beginning to take root. The days that followed felt different. Not like a war zone, not anymore. More like the strange quiet after a storm that should have leveled everything, but didn't. The skies were still a shade darker, the soil still scorched and cracked in some places, but for the first time in years, the Vayari could walk without looking over their shoulders. And the humans? They stayed. It still felt surreal to Lynch, even a week after the core were driven out. Every morning she'd step out from the rebuilt shelter near the southern plains and see Terran machinery humming, floating, welding, doing things her people couldn't even begin to understand. She watched them build what they called a forward relay post, a kind of floating communications tower that linked Drell 9 to Terran satellites hidden deep in the system. She watched one soldier, big, gruff, bald with oil-streaked hands, hand a Vayari child a dried protein bar and a wink, calling it first human cuisine diplomacy. And she watched Admiral Eli Mercer walk her people's grounds like he still didn't believe it was real. He didn't act like a commander. He acted like someone trying to make sense of his past. Lynch found him sitting by the same irrigation ditch where he'd once been found by her great-uncle, the late Elder Vayan. The spot had changed. Burn marks from the recent attack still blackened the soil, but something about it still felt untouched. "You always sit here," she said softly as she approached him. Eli didn't turn. "I remember it being quieter." She sat beside him, wings folded carefully. "It was, before all this." He nodded, still not looking at her. "I was dying here once. Could barely breathe. Had half a ribcage and 1,000 regrets. And your people pulled me out. They didn't know me, couldn't speak my language, but they gave me water, food, and time. And now you've returned it, she said. More than returned it. Eli finally looked at her. Is that how you see it? Balanced now? She hesitated. Isn't it? He looked away again, eyes dark. Not even close. While humans stayed and helped rebuild, tensions began to rise in the stars above. The core hadn't vanished. They had only retreated temporarily, and not by choice. And now, somewhere deep in the black void of their fractured empire, the core broodminds seethed. Inside a hive ship the size of a small moon, Commander Sith Kree crawled across the amber-glowing nerve paths, tail twitching with rage. The Terrans had humiliated them. Worse, they had defended prey. That, above all, could not be forgiven. The Ve'ari were supposed to be erased, made into a lesson for all soft species across the spiral arms. And the humans, they had broken that message. So now the core were preparing something worse. Not just a return, not just revenge, an extermination. Back on Drell 9, the humans didn't know it yet, but something was already beginning to feel off. The orbit was quiet. Too quiet. Juno Kale sat alone in the Resolute's command center, staring at long-range scans that hadn't changed in 2 days. No slipstream spikes, no warp shadows, no radiation traces, she muttered. Across the console, her second-in-command, Lieutenant Grayson, raised a brow. That's good, right? She shook her head. No. The Corps don't lick their wounds this long. They're fanatics, not diplomats. They don't regroup. They retaliate. So what are we saying? She exhaled. We're saying they're planning something. Big. She tapped a few keys, switching comms over to direct encryption, and sent a priority code down to the surface. It reached Eli Mercer within minutes. Eli stood inside the half-restored Harmony Hall, where the Ve'ari elders had returned to re-establish their council. He didn't wear his armor now, just a black jacket with the faded Terran emblem on the shoulder and dirt on the boots. He looked out of place, but somehow trusted. When his comlink buzzed, he stepped aside. Juno's voice filled the channel. They're coming. His back stiffened. How sure? Too sure to ignore it. We're not picking up any signs, but that's the point. They're masking, laying low, waiting. Eli rubbed a hand over his face. We don't have the numbers for another assault like last time. No, but we've got the time. We can dig in, prepare, make it a fortress. Drell 9's not built for war, Juno. Then we make it so. So began the second phase. Preparation. But this time the Ve'ari didn't watch from the sidelines. They joined in. Lynch was the first to volunteer for what the Terrans called base integration. She didn't understand all the terms, forward recon, gravnet shielding, drone uplinks, but she understood urgency. She and a dozen other Ve'ari worked side by side with human engineers, learning fast, adapting. The Ve'ari weren't built for war, but now they were learning it anyway, because they had no choice. In orbit, the returning Terran ships brought more than just supplies. They brought stories. Word had spread across mercenary networks, former Navy channels, even outlaw forums. The tale of Drell 9, of the Ve'ari kindness and the Terran return, had ignited something in the human diaspora. More ships came. Not military fleets, not clean and shiny Republic vessels, but the Black Flag crews, the freelancers, the forgotten. Old freighters repurposed with plasma cannons, junker ships turned into battering rams. Even a few cyborg collectives from the outer moons showed up, wanting in. They didn't ask for pay. They just asked for a place in the line, and Eli gave it to them. A week later, the sky finally screamed. Juno was the first to see it. 12 warp shadows, no ID signatures. Formation is tight, too tight. Not cargo, not trade, core ships, at least a dozen. but more are behind them. Eli stood beside her, jaw tight. How long? 6 hours, maybe less. They're coming in hot. He turned to the comms officer. Send the word to all Terran ships. Activate ground defenses, lock shields. He paused. And tell the Vayari, it's time. Lynch stood in front of a Vayari squad. They were scared. Wings twitching, feet shifting on the ground. She was scared too. But she didn't let it show. Years ago, she said, her voice loud, we saved a dying human. No weapons, no reason, just kindness. She looked around. And because of that one act, an entire species came back for us. She pointed to the skies, where the faint glows of Terran ships drifted like sentinels. Now it is our turn. We are not warriors, but we will not be victims again. Her wings flared out wide. We fight beside them, not behind, beside. And so, as the Corps arrived again, this time in greater numbers, with heavier firepower, they did not find a quiet, helpless world. They found a wall, orbit filled with mismatched Terran ships, arranged in brutal, uneven but effective formations. Drell 9's surface crackled with improvised rail turrets, borrowed human drone sentries, and energy shields adapted from ancient mining fields. And standing among it all, humans and Vayari together, side by side. When the Corps fleet dropped out of warp and opened fire, they expected collapse. What they found instead was resistance. Hard, brutal, unrelenting. The Second Battle of Drell 9 had begun. And this time, humanity wasn't answering a call. They were guarding a future. The sky tore open with fire. It started with a ripple in the clouds, blue 1 second, then blistering red. The Corps fleet dropped in tight formation, no warning, no hesitation. Massive hive ships, like chitin-covered moons, blinked into orbit, flanked by spiked frigates and escort claws shaped like predatory beetles. They came fast. And they came to finish what they started. Eli Mercer watched the tactical screen from Resolute's bridge as it flooded with red markers. His jaw clenched. The room dimmed as shields surged online and the ship's core reactor screamed back to full burn. All stations, battle ready, Juno Kale said without looking up. Grid defenses active, Terran fleet in position, estimated enemy force, 35 confirmed ships, possibly more in cloak range. Eli didn't respond immediately. He stared at the formation. The Corps had brought more than expected. Not a counterattack, an eradication fleet. They hadn't come to take Drell 9. They came to burn it to ash. Let them try, he said quietly. All ships, fire at will. The orbital battle erupted like a supernova. From behind the moon's shadow, a Terran missile barge launched a barrage of fusion warheads that streaked through vacuum like glowing serpents. Corps counterfire lit up the dark in pulses of green and white. Ship hulls groaned, screamed, and tore. Nemesis Fire 2 collided headfirst with a Corps spear frigate, its captain steering straight into death with a smile on her lips and plasma grenades primed in the cargo hold. When it exploded, it took 3 enemy ships with it. Thirsty Dog moved like a drunk boxer in a back alley fight, erratic but deadly. Mace Drake roared commands through smoke-filled corridors as he dodged particle lances and fired point-blank plasma bolts at enemy hulls with unhinged glee. Above all of it, Resolute held the center. Old, massive, slow, but unbreakable. Her main coilgun punched holes clean through the enemy line, and her flak turrets mowed down incoming fighter swarms like flies in fire. But it wasn't enough. Juno grimaced as more red dots appeared on the screen. Another wave incoming. Heavy carriers. They're cycling in reinforcements from a mobile gate system. Eli's face went pale. They brought a jump gate? Portable, short-term, just enough to flood the field. How many? Juno turned. All of them. On the ground, the first tremors began. The Corps didn't just fight from the sky. They dropped. Meteor-sized pods rained down across the continent, embedding themselves deep into the soil. Hatches cracked open and unleashed a flood of horrors. Armor-shelled infantry, spider-like command drones, and toxin breathers that melted rock with each step. The southern valley, where Lynch and her squad had just completed setting up ground shields, was the first to be hit. A pod slammed into the ridge above, throwing fire and debris everywhere. Lynch hit the ground hard, ears ringing, feathers scorched. Her vision blurred, but she forced herself up. The first wave was already coming, Corps infantry pouring over the hill, shrieking in their awful hive speak. But this time, the Ve'ari didn't run. They fired. Homemade rifles crafted from Terran blueprints spat energy bolts into the dark. Drones, co-piloted by Ve'ari techs, hovered low and burned holes in chitin armor. Terran soldiers barked orders, covering their smaller allies with heavy fire. One Ve'ari warrior, a young male named Reshko, screamed as he tackled a Corps brute twice his size, jamming an explosive pack beneath its chest plate before the creature crushed him under its clawed foot. The blast took out 3 more Corps, and Lynch, covered in blood and ash, kept firing. At the old Harmony Hall, Eli landed via shuttle, rifle in hand, body armor scuffed but solid. He had to see the line for himself. "Admiral," Lynch said, saluting despite the chaos. "We're holding, but they're pressing harder every minute. We need air support." "You'll get it," Eli replied. "And you'll hold this line no matter what." She nodded, eyes grim. "We will." He looked around. "Where's Jiro?" Jiro was their best scout, half blind in one eye, sarcastic, fearless. Lynch's oldest friend. "He didn't make it," she said quietly. Eli lowered his head. "Another name, another ghost." There were too many ghosts already. In orbit, Resolute was taking damage. "Starboard shielding at 42%, Juno snapped. "We've lost dorsal battery 3. Engineering reports a coolant leak in the main reactor. Hull breach on decks 5 through 8. Eli's voice came over the comm. "You hold her together, Juno. No one else can fly that beast but you." She smirked, despite the flames licking at the walls. "Wasn't planning on quitting, sir." As more Corps ships poured through the gate, Resolute turned toward them, damaged, slow, and furious. Then she opened fire again, and again, and again. The dreadnought refused to fall. Lynch watched the sky split. She was covered in soot, her arm dislocated and eyes red from smoke, but she stood. From the western ridge, she saw it. 3 Corps drop pods breaching the inner shield and heading toward the vault. The vault, still sealed, still misunderstood, still dangerous. The Corps wanted it, needed it, and she knew what would happen if they got inside. She turned to her squad, what was left of them. "We stop them here." One Terran engineer, limping and covered in burns, looked at her and nodded. "We're with you." And so they ran. Not away. Toward the fire. The final line held at the vault. Lynch and her team reached it seconds before the Corps did. Explosions rocked the ground, sending tremors through the ancient foundations. The first wave of Corps drones came like a tide, but humanity had taught the Ve'ari how to hold a line. They didn't just fire, they adapted, they improvised, they fought with teeth, claws, and Terran rage. At one point, a Corps commander broke through the barricade, towering above Lynch. She didn't flinch. She grabbed a Terran pulse grenade, pulled the pin, and jammed it into the beast's exposed thorax. The explosion threw her back 20 feet. When she landed, her hearing was gone, her ribs broken, but the Corps commander was dead, and the vault was safe. Above, Resolute was dying. Fire licked the control panels, Hull breaches flashed red on every screen. Juno stood at the helm, coughing blood. "Sir," she said through the comm, "she's not going to make it." Eli's voice came soft. "Then we give her a funeral they'll remember." Juno smiled. "Glad to have served with you, Admiral." Then she turned the dreadnought toward the core gate. All remaining energy into the engines. No retreat. The Resolute became a meteor. She slammed into the core gate structure at terminal velocity, tearing through its coils, its power systems, its spires. A massive chain reaction began, and in a brilliant flash of light, like a second sun, both Resolute and the core gate were vaporized. Thousands of core ships trapped behind it, cut off, stranded. The tide had turned. The battle lasted 3 more hours. Terrans and Veyari fought together in the blood and mud. Orbit slowly quieted as the core realized they were losing. And then it stopped. Just like that. The last core ship fled. The few remaining ground units were hunted down by combined strike teams. Drill 9 survived. Again. But the cost was heavy. Eli returned to the surface with burns on half his body, dragged out of a shuttle crash by Lynch herself. Juno Kyle was gone. Resolute was gone. Hundreds of Terran dead. Dozens of Veyari. But they had done it. Together. That night, no one sang. No one drank. No parades, no drums. Just silence. Eli sat in the ruins of Harmony Hall, staring at a shard of metal from Resolute's hull. Lynch sat beside him. "She died for us," she whispered. "She died because she believed we owed you more than just one fight," he replied. "She believed in you." Lynch looked at him. "And now?" Eli stood slowly. "Now we build, and we stay. No more debts, just home." And for the first time since the war began, he smiled. Not because they won, but because they endured. The war was over. The sky no longer burned. The ground no longer trembled. But peace, as everyone quickly learned, wasn't quiet. It was heavy. Heavy with names. Heavy with the silence left by those who didn't come back. Heavy with questions nobody dared speak aloud, especially the one that haunted Admiral Eli Mercer every morning. Was it worth it? Drell 9 stood, yes. The Veyari were alive. The core were broken, humiliated, and driven into the shadows. The vault remained untouched, and humanity, scattered, wounded, unruly humanity, had proven itself something terrifying and beautiful in one breath. But still, he couldn't escape the weight. The memorial wall was the first thing they built. Not for politics, not for pride, for memory. Near the edge of the southern plains, where the last stand was made near the vault, a long black structure now stood, carbon alloy from the wreckage of the Resolute, polished and curved like a blade. No flags flew above it, no lights, no speakers, just one thing: names. Carved deep into the alloy with plasma etching, the names spiraled along the surface in a winding path. Humans, Veyari, smugglers, soldiers, farmers, volunteers, drones who gave their last scan. At the very top, bold and lonely, was one name in larger print. Commander Juno Kale Lynch visited the wall every day. She didn't speak when she went. She didn't need to. Sometimes she'd run her fingers over a name she hadn't known until after the battle. A girl named Elin who died defending a water purifier. A Veyari boy who refused to leave the medical tent even after the 3rd drone wave hit. A cyborg pilot who crashed his ship into a core drop pod while singing an old Earth song. The wall was long and still not finished. Each morning they added more names. Eli stood overlooking the construction site near the ruins of Harmony Hall. What had once been ceremonial ground was now filled with motion. Terran drones moving crates, Vayari architects sketching layouts in the dirt, humans and bird-like aliens arguing over ventilation systems and plumbing in 3 languages. No longer just a hall. Now it was becoming something more. A base, a refuge, a beginning. They called it the Ember Hold. Not a colony, not a stronghold. Something new. Something both. A Terran Vayari co-founded settlement, built not on conquest but on blood shared in defense. Eli leaned on a cane now, his leg never healed right after the last blast wave. His hair had gone fully gray in just a few weeks. The medics said stress did that. He didn't care. He'd seen too many things to care about age. Beside him, Mace Drake lit a cigar, then looked around the camp. "Well," Mace muttered. "I've seen worse starts." Eli raised an eyebrow. "When?" "Okay, maybe not," Mace admitted with a grunt. "But I like it. No one's barking orders, no warlords, no Republic admirals giving speeches, just people making things work." Eli nodded. "And that's what scares me." Mace turned. "Why?" "Because when things work, someone always tries to break them." He wasn't wrong. 3 weeks after the battle, as repairs were ongoing and new defense satellites were being launched into orbit, a transmission broke through the silence. It didn't come from the core, it came from the Terran Republic. An official Navy cruiser, TRV Justice Blade, appeared on the edge of the system. Clean hull, gleaming emblem, broadcasting standard peacekeeping protocols. "Unregistered Terran and alien vessels in contested space," came the message. "Stand down. This system is under formal assessment for political integration. Prepare for debriefing and re-assimilation." Juno would have spat blood if she'd heard it. Eli just stared at the message. Lynch stood next to him in the new command tent. "What does that mean?" "It means," Eli said, "they want to claim the victory." "Yours?" He shook his head. "Ours." A high-ranking diplomat arrived 2 days later. A young man, polished and sharp-tongued, uniform pristine, speech memorized. "We recognize the brave actions of Terran forces and cooperative Vayari citizens during the recent skirmish with the Corps. The Republic is prepared to extend official sovereignty over Drell 9 to provide security, infrastructure, and political representation for all survivors." Eli stared at him without blinking. "You mean you're here to plant a flag and write history how you want it?" The diplomat smiled. "Admiral Mercer, with respect, this is not the wild zone anymore. Order is returning." Eli leaned forward, voice low. "Then you're too late. Order's already here." The Republic didn't like that. Within days, political agents began circulating. They asked questions, pushed paperwork, measured power cells. Tried to buy loyalty from captains with old bounties and from Vayari elders with trade contracts. But something unexpected happened. No one bit, because no one forgot who actually bled for this soil. The Vayari refused integration without full dual governance. The Terrans refused to hand over control to those who'd ignored their call when the Corps first came. And Eli? He stood before a hastily gathered crowd in Emberhold, voice quiet but sharp as a blade. "We answered a call, not for territory, not for wealth, but because honor demanded it. If the Republic wants to come here now and reap the rewards, they'll have to look us in the eye and admit they abandoned this world first." He paused, then added, "And if they try to take it by force, well, Drell 9 remembers." The crowd didn't cheer. They just stood, silent, proud, and unified. Lynch, now wearing a translator unit and Terran chest armor with a Vayari crest etched into it, found herself at the center of a new role. She wasn't just a survivor now, she was becoming a symbol. Young Vayari followed her lead. Some even shaved part of their feathers the way human soldiers did. They trained with Terran rifles. They rebuilt old halls not into temples, but into schools, teaching both human and Veari history. One afternoon, she sat across from Eli, sipping a bitter drink he called coffee. It was awful, but she drank it anyway. He smirked. "You're a long way from the girl who ran water deliveries." She stared into her mug. "So are you." He looked out the window. "Do you think they'll let this last, the suits in orbit?" She was quiet a long time. Then, "If they don't, we'll make them." As months passed, a strange peace settled over Drell 9. Not fragile, not temporary. Earned. The core never returned. Not yet. They were licking their wounds. Their leadership shattered. The Republic didn't push harder. Public outcry had grown too loud, especially when Terran veterans, some famous, some forgotten, began speaking up about what happened. Drell 9 became a myth, a story, a whisper among systems that maybe, just maybe, humans weren't just destroyers. They were protectors, when they chose to be. And somewhere deep beneath the vault, where the strange technology still pulsed, faint and silent, Terran and Veari scientists now worked side by side, carefully, respectfully, because no one had forgotten that all of this started because of that. Because once, a dying man had been pulled from the dirt by a peaceful people who owed him nothing. And now, his kind had carved a legacy into the stars, not for conquest, but for loyalty, for memory, for something rarer than war, gratitude. The vault was alive, not in a way anyone could see at first, not with motion or light or any grand cosmic gesture. No doors hissed open, no alien figure emerged from a glowing cocoon. It simply pulsed, faintly, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. It had always pulsed. But now, it was getting louder. Dr. Aya Voss, a Terran xenotechnologist who had once reverse-engineered syndicate cyberviruses for a living, stood at the edge of the access platform deep beneath Drell 9, hands trembling slightly. "Feel that?" she whispered. Lynch stood beside her, feathers bristling with unease. "Yes. It's been humming for 3 nights. We thought it was residual seismic stress," Aya finished. "Yeah. That's what I thought too. But now?" She turned to the screen hovering in front of her. "It's not stress. It's a signal. The vault is waking up." They called in Eli the next morning. The Admiral didn't sleep well anymore. What with the leg wound, the stress, and dreams that had started feeling more like memories of battles that hadn't happened yet. He leaned on his cane as he stepped into the vault's outer antechamber, the walls glowing dimly with shifting geometric patterns. Aya gave him a look he didn't like, half excitement, half dread. "This thing's old, Admiral, ancient, precursor level, maybe even older." He frowned. "Older than the first civilizations?" "I think this thing predates gravity stabilization, fusion drives, hell, maybe even stars forming." Eli crossed his arms. "Then what's it doing buried under a dead mining world?" Aya looked up towards the vaulted ceiling. "Waiting." Lynch stood quietly off to the side, her gaze fixed on the glowing lines running up the walls. "It's not just tech," she said softly. "The Elders always said the vault wasn't ours, that it wasn't even of this galaxy." Aya nodded. "That tracks. These symbols don't match anything in any linguistic archive. Not human, not Veari, not even core. But the weird thing is..." She walked over to the console. "It responds to us, not just our machines, us, living beings. The pulses are different when Lynch is near. They shift when you speak. I think it knows we're here." Eli glanced at her. "And what do you think it wants?" Aya paused. "I don't know, but I think it remembers being betrayed." 3 nights later, the vault opened. No explosion, no dramatic surge of energy, just a faint hum that deepened into a rumble. The central dais split, and a sphere rose from the center of the chamber, hovering, spinning slowly, metallic and glass-like, but not reflecting anything around it. It pulsed once, then again, stronger each time. Aya's voice came through the base-wide comms. "All personnel to secure stations. The vault has activated." Eli and Lynch were the first to arrive. The sphere stopped spinning as they entered the room, almost as if it had been waiting for them. Then it spoke. Not in words, but in thoughts. Eli froze. The world around him faded. He couldn't hear the hum of machines, couldn't see the walls. He stood in darkness, alone, but not alone. He felt seen. And then the voice, massive, cold, and old beyond imagining, spoke inside his mind. "You are the inheritors." He stumbled back, gasping. Lynch caught his arm. "I heard it too," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It spoke to both of us." Aya's voice cracked through the comms again. "Admiral, our equipment's going haywire. Radiation is spiking, but there's no source. Energy levels are surging. This thing's talking to something. Or someone." Eli stared at the sphere. "Inheritors of what?" The vault responded instantly. "The responsibility, the failure, the weapon." And then it showed them. Memories. Not their own. Visions exploded behind their eyes. Alien starscapes, planets ripped apart by gravitational weapons, species made of light and dust waging war in silence. A galaxy before humanity, before Vayari, before time as they knew it. A war so vast it made the core look like children throwing stones. And in the middle of it all, a creation, not a weapon, not exactly, but a failsafe, a seed, buried in the quietest corner of the galaxy. Meant to wait, meant to observe, meant to awaken only when the conditions were right, when the balance tipped too far again. And now, with the core's brutal expansion, the galactic order unraveling, and ancient species extinct or silent, the vault believed that time had come. When Eli came back to himself, he was on his knees. Lynch was beside him, breathing hard. Blood dripped from her beak. Aya knelt over them, pale and wide-eyed. "What did you see?" Aya asked. Eli stared at the sphere. "I saw a responsibility, a message left by beings that are gone, and a choice." Aya looked between them. "What kind of choice?" Lynch's voice was low, hoarse. "To become what they once were. Or to let everything fall again." In orbit, the TRV Justice Blade picked up the vault's activation spike. Within hours, the Republic knew something had changed. And they weren't the only ones. Across the dark parts of the galaxy, old signals began to awaken. Ancient satellites blinked for the first time in millennia. Hidden networks, forgotten by even their creators, passed along a single piece of information. The vault has opened. The core felt it, not with instruments or data, but in their bones. The broodmind shrieked across hive space, every soldier paralyzed for 5 full seconds by a sudden collective knowing. The thing they feared most had woken. The first enemy. The final weapon. They began to mobilize, not to fight, but to flee. Back on Drell 9, Eli held a private meeting with Lynch and Aya in a sealed chamber under the Ember Hold. "This is bigger than a planet," Eli said. "Bigger than a war. This vault, it's not just a relic, it's a damn relay, a trigger." Aya nodded grimly. "If we touch it the wrong way, it could alert forces beyond anything we've ever faced." "But if we walk away," Lynch said, "we let it rot. Again. We leave the galaxy in the hands of scavengers and cowards." Silence. Eli stood, his cane clacking against the floor. "I didn't come back here for power. I came because a long time ago someone helped me when I was nothing, and I owed them." He looked up at the ceiling. Maybe this is that again. Another chance to repay something we didn't earn. Aya looked at the vault readouts. It's offering us more than a weapon. It's offering us a seat at a table we never knew existed, Eli finished. He turned to Lynch. And I'm not sitting alone. The next day, they summoned the captains. Terran veterans, pirates turned protectors, Veari warriors, hybrid crews from the fringe. Eli stood before them, not as an admiral, but as a man offering a truth too large to deny. This planet holds something ancient, something powerful. We're not chosen. We're just the ones who showed up when no one else did. But now it's looking to us. He let the silence settle. I'm not asking you to fight again. I'm asking you to build, to protect, to guide. Because whether we like it or not, the galaxy just changed. And slowly, the leaders nodded. Not because they understood everything, but because they trusted him. Because trust was how this all started. And because they knew, whatever was coming, whatever the vault would one day reveal, they would face it together. 3 weeks after the vault opened, the sky above Drell 9 changed again, not from fire or falling ships, but from stars that weren't supposed to be there. They blinked into orbit without warning. No slipstream distortion, no warp trails. One moment the night sky was familiar. The next, a constellation of obsidian ships hovered above the atmosphere, perfectly still. Not core, not Terran, not anything. For a full hour, they didn't move, didn't scan, didn't speak, and then they did. A single voice, deep, layered, emotionless, echoed inside the minds of everyone within a 100-kilometer radius of the vault. We acknowledge the signal. The Guardians are extinct. Their duty now falls to you. No one understood at first, but the vault did. It pulsed once, then opened again, wider this time. The sphere from before floated upward, rising slowly from the chamber until it passed through solid stone like vapor, emerging into the sky above Emberhold. Terran soldiers and Veari citizens alike looked up, shielding their eyes from the growing brilliance. Eli stood below, wind tearing at his coat, his old bones screaming from the cold. It's begun, he said softly. Lynch stood beside him, her feathers rustling in the current. What is that? Aya Voss, barely able to speak, answered. A relay node, not just for information, for activation. Of what? Aya swallowed. Of us. Later that night, beneath emergency shelter domes erected around the vault site, they held a private meeting, just the three of them, Eli, Lynch, Aya, and the sphere. They didn't know how it worked. There were no projectors, no emitters, no obvious interfaces. But it spoke when it wanted to. And it showed them what it wanted them to see. What came next wasn't history. It was a warning. The galaxy had once been ruled, not politically but functionally, by an ancient council of species bound by one rule: protect the balance. No empires, no mass extinctions, no technological monopolies. Any civilization that grew too fast, expanded too violently, or threatened the survival of others was corrected. Sometimes through diplomacy, often through war. This was the role of the Guardians, an alliance of species who took it upon themselves to prevent collapse. But like all great powers, they fractured. Some began believing they knew better than the balance. Others wanted to weaponize the tools they were sworn to protect. Civil war followed, mass extinction, and finally, silence. But they'd left behind fail-safes. The vaults. Not to rule, but to watch, to wait, to awaken. If and only if the chaos they once prevented began again. And now, with the core rampaging, the Republic collapsing into corruption, and ancient species vanishing one by one, The vault had chosen humanity, and by extension, the Vayari. "No," Eli said flatly after the vision faded. "I'm no galactic judge. I came here to repay a kindness, not inherit a damn empire." But the vault responded not with anger, not with force, only truth. "Judgment is not your duty. Protection is. The path is chosen, not by blood, by action." Lynch stepped forward slowly. "And if we say no?" The light dimmed. "Others will choose. They will not be merciful." Days passed. The obsidian ships remained above, never approaching, never attacking, only watching. Whispers spread. Other systems were beginning to detect ancient vault signatures awakening. Not all were on friendly worlds. Some were already being corrupted. Aya called them dark vaults, fractured ones, vaults that didn't wait to be found by protectors, vaults that were taken by force. And somewhere out there, others were racing to claim them. If the Terrans and Vayari turned away now, the balance wouldn't just shift. It would collapse. Eli stood again before the council that had formed in Emberhold, a mix of Terran captains, Vayari elders, engineers, farmers, former outlaws, new soldiers. No flags flew behind him, only the stars. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "Neither did any of you." He paused. "But a long time ago, someone helped me without expecting anything in return. They didn't weigh the risks. They didn't care what I'd done. They just saved a stranger." His voice lowered. "And now we've all been offered something. Not power, not territory, a chance, a responsibility." He looked around. "This galaxy is broken, and if we walk away, it'll stay broken. But if we stay, if we fight, if we protect, maybe we become something better than what came before." Lynch stepped forward. "And we won't do it alone." They called themselves the Echo Pact, born not of politics but of memory, forged in blood, rebuilt in fire, a coalition of the forgotten, the unwanted, the ones who answered the call not because they had to, but because they chose to. From Emberhold, they began reaching out, slowly, quietly, to isolated colonies, hunted fringe worlds, drifting stations once abandoned to core raids. They sent envoys, sometimes ships, sometimes just messages. "You are not forgotten. You are not alone." And in time, they began receiving answers. From a planet burned in the last core siege, a single carrier arrived with refugees and engineers. From a rogue AI collective orbiting a dead sun, an offer of weaponized drone support. From a silent system once deemed cursed by explorers, a vault awakening and waiting. The galaxy was stirring, and this time, humanity wasn't at war with it. This time, they were guarding it. 1 year later, a single core scout ship returned to Drell 9. Not in attack, in surrender. The core commander, battered and missing half his exoskeleton, knelt before Eli Mercer in the ruins of what had once been a command bunker. "They are coming," he said in a rasping voice. "Worse than us, older than us." Eli said nothing. He didn't have to. Because behind him, the vault pulsed once more, not as a call, as a response, and so in the final days of the second cycle of war, in a quiet corner of a forgotten planet, the galaxy shifted again. Not with fire, but with resolve. Because once the Vayari saved a human, and when the time came, humanity remembered. Now both stood together, no longer prey, no longer forgotten, but as the first line, the last line, the echo that would not fade.